By 2005, Rockstar San Diego were a more important subsidiary than North. They had just released the third Midnight Club title, now one of my favorite racing games. Seriously, what took me so long? The series began as one of the first ever to come out during the 6th generation, a spiritual success in a Midtown Madness, and have been to 8 cities, combined cars with motorbikes, and partnered with a car magazine. And by 2005, they announced a follow-up to Red Dead Revolver simply called Old West Project, aka Red Dead Redemption, and they were also setting up Rockstar Games and all their subsidiaries for the next couple of generations, maybe even the 9th, developing the Rockstar Advanced Game Engine after the renderware came under ownership by EA, after they purchased Criterion Games, the makers of that engine. Combined with the pressures of delivering the next generation after owning the early 2000s, the heat was on for Rockstar. Development was surprisingly secretive compared to other Rockstar games, even producer Jay Panic admitted just as much, but the two biggest goals they wanted to accomplish with this follow-up was to set everything on one map, which eliminated loading times that plagued a lot of games in the 6th generation. For them, the city was obvious. Midnight Club Los Angeles was announced on May 2007 and released for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and portable a year later after a few delays, October 2008, half a year after Grand Theft Auto 4, and 1 month before its rival Need for Speed Undercover. Well, what was meant to be the rival. The tide really had turned that year, but we'll get to that in the future. And yes, we're looking at the complete edition, not the dub edition. Although dub magazines still played just as much of an important role as its predecessor. As I explained in my Need for Speed Carbon and Pro Street reviews, during the late 2000s I lost interest in what was trending. In fact, I didn't get a PlayStation 3 until 2009, so I just stuck with Grand Theft Auto and Gran Turismo. And when I eventually got one, because I grew up with Need for Speed instead of Midnight Club, like the rest of the series, this one slipped my mind, and bought Shift instead. It took requests from you ladies and gentlemen after the GTA reviews became popular on this channel to finally look into it, and now we've reached the end of the road, back in Los Angeles. Is it the best one?
Nice car!
Thank you. What, so you book?
So they say.
What?
Man, don't tell everyone.
Trust me, man, I won't.
Man, you're funny.
An unnamed protagonist arrives from the East Coast to make a name for himself in the tuna scene of LA.
What you mean, race some slow cars? There's a lot of kids hanging around down on the strip.
He meets up with Book, who tells him to earn rep by winning races, and also hooks him up with Carol, who owns garages around the city so he can either purchase vehicles, customize them, or lay low when the police are searching. And that's about it. I played over 20 hours of this game and only around 15 minutes of it is cutscenes, which to be fair is more than any Need for Speed title that precedes this game, and they're not as distracting. But it's about as developed as the predecessors.
You've got to be kidding me. I thought you weren't like that.
I'm not. I'm, just down here to get a tattoo.
Really?
Yeah. I was thinking try hard right here on my neck.
Very funny.
It's a non-factor. Just there to add to the street racing scene of LA, drive different types of vehicles, and showcase what the Rage engine can do since it looks better than the previous generation. The cutscenes are in-game.
Go race some of the locals, then I'm sure they'll let you roll with them.
Hey man, I was gonna tell them that.
Hey, thanks.
Like all the predecessors, you find rival drivers and tournaments to enter with the same event types like ordered race, circuit, red light, with a few new ones including highway sprints, time trials, pink slips, and wagers.
You even know what you're getting into down here?
Car racing, I hope.
There's no need to repeat myself too much here. This improved structure worked really well for Midnight Club 3, going from finding a couple of drivers with unlicensed cars to a more complete arcade racer. But here, instead of winning enough rival races to unlock another city to do the same thing, as the title implies, the entire game is set in LA, and is all about unlocking options to make your car or bike faster than the opponents, and looking good doing it.
Oh yeah!
Whenever you win a race, you earn reputation points which accumulate slowly, and there are other things you can do as well, like evading police, speeding the rival to the start line, delivering vehicles from the garage, and breaking other people's cars like one of Kenichi's races in Midnight Club 2. Obviously, winning events is by far the best way to make a name for yourself in LA, just not the only thing, which increases the gameplay variety a bit. And it's not like you're reading through chapters where there's a driver waving the ticket to the next city like a school bully. Even though it technically has a chapter setup where a majority of the first few races are set in Hollywood, then Santa Monica and downtown, the whole map is available from the beginning. And this isn't just an enhanced version of Midnight Club 2 or something that would inspire GTA 5, 5 years later, it's an all-new map bigger than San Diego, Atlanta, and Detroit for Midnight Club 3 combined. The developers were able to license a lot of the notable landmarks of the city to look as authentic as possible, with one reviewer claiming he was able to find his way back to a hotel he was staying in during his visit in LA thanks to this game. I mean, I've never been here before, and the only knowledge I have of the city based on road placement is this game and GTA 5, and the latter is just a satire of it. Come on, at least I admit it. So, what do I know? It looks more like a sim arcade without playing like one, but that's what Midnight Club is about. Driving and performing moves only Hot Wheels can do in real life cities while embracing the tuna scene. And if you get the complete edition, you get South Central, which increases a third of the map size. So yeah, if you plan on getting this game, it has to be the complete edition because all the DLC that comes with it can't be downloaded anymore. The developers clearly took advice from some of their buddies in Edinburgh. Whenever you boot up the game, everything is loaded up, you're taken straight to the career mode, and there are practically no loading times from there on out. So they were able to accomplish their biggest goals. In fact, it loads faster than GTA 4, and because it isn't as gloomy, it's nicer to look at too.
Hollywood was getting played out. Decadent and unfulfilling, you know? But things are all different down here. These people are loco homes, and I fit right in.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's the only Midnight Club title to have a 24-hour day and night cycle, though sunrise and sunset make traffic harder to dodge. Seriously, that car looked like it was camouflaged to the road with the lights off. It runs in 1080p even on the PlayStation 3. The frame rate is not 60 per second, but still smooth for something that only runs on consoles, especially when comparing it to Midnight Club 3. It has a good licensed soundtrack, and if you don't think so, you can always add your own custom playlists, and an interior view unique to every vehicle. The fact that Rockstar San Diego developed Midnight Club LA 3 years after its predecessor, while they were also focused on Red Dead Redemption, is nothing short of remarkable, although we now know how much it affected them. Car interiors were a feature in racing games I was looking forward to the most when entering the 7th generation, and had I played this in the late 2000s, I would have tried to beat it with this view only. There's just something cool about being inside the car, and from a retrospective view, I think it looks better than Forza Motorsport and Gran Turismo. You shuffle the wheel on tight corners and change gear visually. I guess when you have less cars than those games, you have the freedom to do more, though I don't remember a Mercedes-Benz S-Class having a manual gearbox option. Even a decade later, this game still looks like a proper interpretation of a smaller Los Angeles. But when you consider that it's running on an engine the developers themselves created, don't forget about the origin story of Angel Studios, graphics were never going to be a question mark. What the hell was that? Okay, it's not perfect. The game crashed twice towards the latter part of the career mode, but it's not enough to discourage me from playing. Speaking of the Mercedes-Benz S-Class, all the cars here are licensed, and while the total number has been slightly reduced, the number of brands has increased, including Ford, Aston Martin, and Audi to name a few, along with the returning ones VW, Mercedes, Chevrolet, Cadillac, definitely giving Need for Speed a run for their money when it comes to brands, including some of the traffic on the road. Car manufacturers by this point have clearly understood the marketing value of putting their models in video games damaged or not, compared to the early 2000s. Because look at them after a race.
You crazy, man?
That must have hurt.
I like that if your car is damaged, you get it repaired for the next race. The body parts look like they're bolted on in the last minute, and to get it looking brand new again, you need to go to a garage or petrol station, particularly handy in the payback missions. However, it's not as dependent on as many different vehicle types compared to the predecessor. In fact, lowriders, choppers, and SUVs have been omitted completely. I wasn't a fan of these anyway. Maybe I wasn't the only one. After all, Jay Panik said once that programming the motorbike physics was, quote, very tricky to pull off, unless you get the complete edition. Then you get 4 lowriders, a Range Rover, along with a few cars and 1 motorbike.
What, me driving this, you driving that? Nervous, no. Embarrassed, maybe. I feel like a bully picking on little kids.
Really? You know, because I was thinking I looked like a guy who bullied the elderly.
Unfortunately, what you can do with them has been taken to heights I haven't seen anywhere else in a video game. If another generation and game engine proved what it can do graphically, just wait till you see what you can do with your vehicles. Almost everything on a car or motorbike can be fine-tuned in some way. The paint color can be whatever you want, two-tone on any side, unique body parts, interiors, racing seats, the wheels and tires can all be different sizes individually with 3 color options, hydraulics, nearly 100 license plates, and if digital art is your profession, you're going to be spending more than half your playthrough just creating visual design presets, which can be saved by the way. However, this means it's not as simple as the predecessor. Now instead of one layer, you have hundreds of them on each side to work with, and with the number of vinyls and decals available, if you know what you're doing, the cars will look like something out of an art gallery from outer space or from the fiery depths of hell. But if you don't, getting the car to look exactly the way you want it to look is about as complicated as brain surgery. Now when moving, reshaping or coloring a graphic, it doesn't move anywhere near as slowly as Carbon or Pro Street. It'll be interesting to see what Undercover did 1 month after the release of this game. But okay, check out this scenario. I have ColourShed written on one side, decide to duplicate it onto the other side of the car, and it's pasted the wrong way around. And I have to painstakingly reposition and reverse them back in place before they look similar on both sides. Yeah, I didn't bother in the end. There has to be a different way because you do the same thing in a Forza Motorsport game, the wording and decals will be the right way around. You also can't move the camera when editing the graphic unless you want the controls to be all over the place, and 95% of sponsor decals can't be colored to match the style you're aiming for. I don't think I'm creative enough to do something that drastic with this many unique vinyls. And because I review games, it's harder to make time for it. This is why my first car looks like Mr. Beans. I couldn't resist. Why a lot of the vinyl jobs are pre-made, and why I only bothered to take one custom visual job seriously, so of course it had to be a Class A car with rainbow colors. If I took the time to work it out, you'll all need to wait probably another few days for this review to come out. What would you prefer? Fortunately, vinyls are only just a small portion of the whole customization experience, and it's seriously good fun experimenting with all the vehicle types. To go from no customization options in the first 2 games to something this cartoonish shows just how far the series has come. You have potentially thousands of different options, and is way better than anything the Need for Speed series has done up to that point. Better than Forza Motorsport? Yeah, I'd go with that too. Yes, you need plenty of patience to comprehend certain features, but it's the same story with a lot of things in life, like my experience with game reviews for example. Besides, like Midnight Club 3, performance is the only thing that matters when it comes to customization.
Hey, you're not the only guy who's invested time and money in his ride.
Let's talk about the controls. Well, the default ones. Now I guarantee there are a lot of people who are watching this were something on the lines of, whoa, how do I, wait, that doesn't make the first time they ever played this game because of the default controls. Now there are some video games that let you use the right analog stick for braking and accelerating, like Gran Turismo 4 for example, but I never did. So yeah, these controls caught me off guard. I imagine if there was a PC version you would use the mouse for handling and the clickers for braking and acceleration. And the camera view? It's busier than an airport. Not that it makes me nauseous or anything, but it's hard to concentrate what's ahead of you when the camera keeps shaking and zooming all over the place. Combine the two together with the difficulty, which I'll get to, and you get a recipe for chaos. So it doesn't set a good first impression compared to the predecessors. My guess is that the developers, like everything else in this game, wanted to try something different. I'm not outraged, just not a fan, because fortunately you can change the button layout to suit your needs, which I did on the first race. And as you can tell throughout the whole review, I'm using the classic camera view, which removes a lot of the jerkiness. There's the aforementioned interior view, but by the time you have a vehicle that's supercar fast, it's good to know everything surrounding you at this pace. So how did the actual cars and motorbikes control compared to the predecessors? Well, it certainly feels less twitchy, like there's a heavy dumbbell in the boot. It's not bad, you can still nitrous, slipstream boost, control yourself in midair. The weather makes a difference. If you're playing a Midnight Club game for the first time and this was it, once you configure it to your liking, it controls just fine. But if you're used to the predecessors, I only just reviewed these two in the span of a few months, this will require more adjustment than the casual gamer.
Wait, you think I need practice to beat you? I just saw you drive, man.
But then again, anything was going to be better than GTA 4 or Need for Speed Pro Street, that's for sure. Motorbikes, on the other hand, if I can win a tournament with supercars on the hard difficulty, only on the second attempt, just minutes after purchasing my first bike, I think the controls for these are also just fine. I didn't need to rely on leaning and wheelies like the predecessors because they grip like geckos.
Don't get crunk cause you was first, baby. I still got a few tricks up my sleeve.
Yeah, that can happen too, so be careful. No matter what the vehicle, it's about maintaining your speed around corners, which is hard to do on the first couple of hours, particularly with your first car, and after you unlock special abilities, using them at the right time. Like the predecessor, Zone, Aggro, and Roar, I never mentioned the latter in the third game, are powers you can use to gain an advantage, along with EMP, which disable all the electronics around you. But unlike the predecessor, these abilities are available for any car you choose, and the more you play this game with that power active, the more often you can use it down the line. The map also doesn't stop you completely as often as the predecessors. You can skim trees, light posts, utility poles, and building corners, so I really wanted to give the controls a chance because it might be because of the first few cars not having high enough stats. And I'm glad I did because now it's good that you have a map that's big enough to provide plus 30 hours of gameplay, a lot more than the Need for Speed titles from around that time combined, so you're already getting your money's worth brand new. But I think the developers underestimated the size a bit because for the first few hours, it feels like a map from Grand Theft Auto where you're required to do all these little missions to learn the mechanics, only the map is fully unlocked from the start, and you need to drive to the other side of it back and forth just to enter a mission. My city is closest to that scenario now that I think about it, and that's what Midnight Club LA feels like for the first half of the playthrough. Even when you get your first car, you're already entering races that take 5 minutes to complete. Most are closer to 3 minutes, which doesn't sound too long, but because you're not exactly driving the fastest set of wheels in LA around that time, until you get at least a Class B vehicle, the first few hours feels surprisingly boring. Maybe it's because the map feels less arcade orientated, not like toy cars being demolished around a model city. They wanted to make something more believable with the Rage engine, the next generation similar to GTA 4. But if this is a game where you can control your vehicle in midair and win a race despite taking multiple head-on collisions, I'm just saying keep a good pace from the beginning. Especially if a lot of the racing routes are reused throughout the game. It feels like the grand total of routes across LA is around 20. I know the number is actually closer to 80, but you get what I'm trying to say. I also noticed that in Midnight Club 3, but at least that game was full speed ahead from start to finish. Whereas the first two games there was always a different route, which is why those games are so hard. There was plenty of trial and error. Now, Midnight Club LA is difficult for different reasons. The city is also loaded with police who are more than just an obstacle while racing. They're a persistent presence everywhere you drive, and if you get caught, you're paying a hefty fine. And this isn't Grand Theft Auto where you get out and continue the rampage. On the flip side, evading them earns you rep. As you progress further, more police are hanging around, but if you slow down and stay on the right side of the road, they won't do anything. Don't worry, the police aren't as petty as the ones in Driver, and they rarely interrupt the races. In fact, it took 15 hours of gameplay before they did for the first time.
Don't worry about me. I can outrun any cops.
But with that said, they're more frustrating than exciting, at least compared to Need for Speed Most Wanted, because there's no reason to enter a police chase, like there's no special event for that sort of thing, and after you finish a race, they're placed right next to you, going 10 times the speed of light without a chance to slow down or even teleport to the garage. And it's such a faff to lose them because they have better vision than eagles when in search mode. Either that or they just spawn close to you. It's like the game's forcing you to be in pursuit for at least a few minutes, so by the time you reach exotic territory, have the pause button prepared after a race just in case. That's the general theme with this game, that sense of genuine risk with everything you do, because you can't exit until you either evade or get caught even in the middle of a race, and that's what makes this game challenging. You'd think because it's from the 7th generation it would be a little bit easier. Wrong. At least the first half of the playthrough.
Hopefully you've realized by now there's all sorts of drivers out there. Some good like me, some bad like you.
Shut up, Carol. Difficulty is rated by the color of the map icon. The harder the event, the more money and rep you earn. The faster the car you drive, the faster the opponents are on the map, which is how it should be. And cars are also categorized in groups so that a faster one from the same class can't have as many performance options available. It's very well structured, and the risk gives you that extra determination to not lose a race. They end in a snap if you take too much damage, and whenever you make a wager, including pink slips, unlike the predecessors, your car is actually on the line as well. I usually try to complete other missions before entering these so that I have plenty of money, because I'm always scared of losing my car.
It's just another race.
Just another race. With a Lamborghini as the prize.
Now you're talking.
At least there are a lot of prizes to win. I mean, how do you think I got this Lamborghini Murcielago?
Even though he looks lame, he's a serious tuner driver. We ain't got time for you.
Yet I'm still treated like a chump.
Sorry to break up your day, fellas.
Whenever you're in a position where you're stuck, you choose to restart. It does so on a different route. I didn't like it at first because I'm so used to the trial and error gameplay in the predecessors. It's like now, all of a sudden, every time I try again, I'm starting somewhere else. It was brief hysteria, but there are only 4 different routes per series, so eventually you'll memorize all of them and win, since, as I explained before, it feels like there are only 20 race routes throughout the whole game. I like that the developers implemented different ways to be challenging, because that's what the series is known for, meaning you always need to keep up the pace with your eyes wide open, in the don't screw up zone. But if there's one thing I wish this game never had, no, not that rivals keep opening their mouths.
Just because you went first, I am not impressed. First place is about to become second.
I see you've assumed your normal position at the back. I knew you'd be weak, man. I could see it.
I wonder why this game encourages aggressive driving. I'm not sure. I'm surprised you don't see a phone being thrown out the window after turning off the voice in the audio settings. That would have been a funny little Easter egg. Besides, our protagonist is prone to a bit of that himself.
Welcome to driving school. I'll be your instructor today.
No, it's not the worst thing. You can actually turn it off. That would be the AI rubber banding. Now, because I'm sick to death of explaining why I hate it so much, I've tried to be cautious here since I have a lot of notes talking about this, making sure I don't rant like a GTA rampage. I've played a lot of racing games on this channel, which means I spot rubber banding quite easily. In the case of Midnight Club LA, it's not as bad as something like Need for Speed Most Wanted, and again, maybe it's because I'm so used to the predecessors where everything is out to get you and you need line reflexes to win. Here you have a map that doesn't stop you as much, so rubber banding was programmed to make up for it, which from my point of view signals laziness. That's what makes me particularly cross about it. The predecessors proved that you didn't need it to be a hard game, therefore winning those harder races isn't as satisfying. Listen to myself, I did it again. I feel like I'm ending this review on a downer, but that's not the end of it. As I continued to persevere, I found that if you drive through shortcuts and little ridges around the street corners properly, you can create a decent lead that opponents never catch up to. In fact, sometimes they're dumb enough to crash themselves. Eventually, it becomes a non-factor. Once you get your head around everything I've talked about, play the game enough, learn the map, maintain speed around corners, and realize that it's the kind of rubber banding where they never take the lead if you're flawless, it all starts to come together and become the Midnight Club title I was hoping for. It becomes fantastic. Maybe a little too easy.
You keep that up, you just might make a name for yourself.
I would have thought racing the same route more than once would have felt boring, but it's not. It means you're concentrating more on the road, less on this, and feel inclined to push harder with the faster car you've got. Calm nerves in the heat of the moment.
Let's go!
maybe a little too philosophical, but I wanted to end this review on a positive note because overall, Midnight Club Los Angeles is one of the best racing games of the 7th generation. It's not as good as the 3rd game, that one does a higher volume of the right things more of the time. This one's not as obstacle based and the first few hours feel like such a grind. But with a garage that turns fantasy into another fantasy that you can interact with, cars you dream of driving, and a map size that can rival other Rockstar games by 2008, it's certainly better than the other predecessors, and compared to Need for Speed Undercover, what was the competition? Well, more than you might think. Initially, there were plans to release a follow-up in the future. We might have had to wait another generation, but at least it wasn't out of the question, until it was. A year later, Rockstar San Diego internally were a train wreck. Producers Jay Panic, Mark Garone, and a lot of other staff were either fired or quit for certain reasons, which meant all of a sudden they didn't have much of the original team left, and management kept changing their minds on whether they were going to do it or not. It was chaos. But then things became clear when the Spouses Against Rockstar San Diego letter was published on January 2010, accusing the developer of unhealthy crunch time during the development of Red Dead Redemption. This meant a lot of Rockstar subsidiaries began to work more closely together and focus on games that would most likely sell more copies like Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption, a more quality over quantity approach. There was Max Payne 3 and Midnight Club Los Angeles, but sales didn't meet Rockstar's expectations, and as technology continues to become more complicated and the games GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2 are still making a lot of money for the publisher, like I said in my Max Payne 3 review, why would they need to make another full game? At least not at the moment. That's my theory.
So this is goodbye? Just like that? After all we've been through.
I'm afraid so. Seriously, it wouldn't surprise me if Midnight Club Los Angeles is the last in the series. Oh well, not that many gaming franchises end with such a good title. And I thank you all for consistently requesting me to review the whole series because I had a blast playing these games. And while it's not that hard to believe that it's been over a decade since Midnight Club LA was released, it's still a little bit sad that it's come to that because imagine what an 8th gen follow-up would have looked like with more cars, customization options, faster gameplay, a bigger map, and maybe a new city they haven't explored yet. But again, that's how big these games are in terms of effort to develop them and how much money they make today. And unfortunately, Midnight Club doesn't have the same levels of popularity. So I'll simply conclude that Midnight Club Los Angeles is still worth playing to the end, just not the first few hours.
Number one, baby!